We're thrilled that you've joined us today. If you're a guest especially, thanks for coming out with us. I want to add one little quick addition to that chili cook-off announcement. So it's a chili cook-off because that's what we've always called it. But the entry is anything you can make in a crock pot. So I know not all of you are really excited about competing with my brisket bacon chili because it's just better than anything else that can be made in the world. I don't know if you've ever combined brisket and bacon and barbecue sauce in a crock pot. If not, go home today and you're welcome. But it'll be wonderful. But I know some of you are more creative as well, and you don't like to make the same thing every year for 7 years in a row like some of us do. So I think last year we had somebody made bread pudding in a crock pot, which whoever did that, please do it again, because I liked stopping by that segment. But other things, do that. The only thing I would say is if you're thinking like, yes, I've been waiting for my lentil soup, just stop. Like, nobody wants that. Keep that at home where your husband pretends to like it, even though he stops by McDonald's on his way home because he knows it's lentil soup night. So bring something hearty, okay, or sweet. Those are your two choices, really, if I'm judging, which I'm not. So if you can make it in a crock pot, bring it. Today we're kicking off a new series that we're going to run just the next 3 weeks here, so just through January, called Kingdom Builders. At Christian Chapel, our Kingdom Builders program is a way that we invest in what God is doing all over the world. So for us, Kingdom Builders is our over and above giving. So it's the gifts that we make beyond our normal kind of tithe offering, our discipline giving, our just the regular things that we do each week. Kingdom Builders Giving is an opportunity for us at the beginning of the year to pray about, God, what would you have me to do to be part of taking your kingdom all over the world and all throughout our community? And so with Kingdom Builders, we have three buckets primarily of investments there. The first is global missions. Through your Kingdom Builders Giving, Christian Chapel supports over 50 missionaries and ministries working in 30 nations around the world. The second is local ministry. Through your Kingdom Builders Giving, we support Royal Family Kids Camp, which sign-ups start today for staff, so please stop by the table in the foyer. It's a free week of camp and a year-long mentoring club for children in foster care. We also support crisis pregnancy outreach and numerous other local ministries working here in Tulsa to just shine the light of Jesus into the lives of people who are lost, who are the least, who are overlooked, and who really need to experience His power and His grace. And then the third bucket of Kingdom Builders Giving is next generation investments. So we invest in our teenagers, our children, through kids camp scholarships, youth camp scholarships. We help our students go on missions trips every summer. We also invest in local elementary school missions here at different schools in the Tulsa area where we've made connections. So Kingdom Builders is just a wonderful way for us to give above and beyond. At Christian Chapel, the idea that we have a responsibility to participate in the work of God around the world has been in our DNA since our very beginning. In fact, in an average year, Christian Chapel will give away between 20 to 30% of our total income to support the work of missions around the world and in our local community. In 2018, we were able to give away a little over $400,000 to support missions, to support the works here in town and all around the world. So that's the result of just your faithful obedience, your incredible generosity, and us understanding that when the Lord blesses us, it is so that it can flow out of us and into the world around us. So thank you for doing that. In 2 weeks, we're going to have an opportunity for me to lay out our 2020 Kingdom Builders Giving projects and invite you to participate in those with us. So I would ask that you start taking the next couple weeks to pray about what God would have you do and how you can participate in that. But this morning, I kind of want to lay some groundwork for us. So our sermon's actually going to be a little bit different. I'm going to preach the first half of it, and then a friend of mine named Trent is going to preach the second half of it. So it'll be a bit different for us. But if you have a Bible, let's go to Matthew chapter 7. This is where we're going to start this morning. So this passage that we're about to read comes at the very end of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7 is the longest extended teaching of Jesus that we have in the Scriptures. And in the Sermon on the Mount, he is describing, this is what my kingdom looks like. This is how people live in my kingdom. This is how my kingdom is different than the world around you. And so he gets into the way we practice our religion, the way we interact with each other, the way we approach revenge and jealousy, the way, just all sorts of things. He goes digging in a lot of areas that make us pretty uncomfortable, honestly. And then at the very end of the Sermon on the Mount, he closes with this story that we're reading this morning. So Matthew chapter 7, we're going to start in verse 24. Jesus says, "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash." When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching because he taught as one who had authority and not as their teachers of the law. So in Matthew 7, Jesus is concluding his sermon. I mean, this is his, like if he's going to give an altar call, this is the moment right before Jesus gives the altar call. And what he says is we all need to pay attention because we are all actively building our lives on something. Whatever we're building on, it's going to be tested. And so we need to make sure we're building on the right foundation so that what we build will last. Now, this idea that Jesus uses of a builder makes sense because his father was a carpenter, right? So Jesus grew up in an environment where there was a lot of building, there was a lot of understanding of those things. I did not grow up in an environment like that at all. So, I don't know, some of you, I know you're very handy, and I'm legitimately impressed by that. I don't have the part of my brain that looks at something broken and thinks, I know how to fix that. So I'm not a complete imbecile. I mean, I can do a few things around the house, the basics, but honestly, most of them, if I fix something at my house, it's almost always with a tool in one hand and a YouTube tutorial in the other, right? And I am just walking through step by step, and I'm going to search through those tutorials till I find the one that is exactly describing the problem that I'm facing. Like if it's my car, I need the exact year, make, and model. If it's the same color, that's going to help me too. Like just kind of walk me through it one by one. Now, so I can get these things done, and when I'm done, I know some of you, when you're done, you have that sense of like you look at it and you point at it and you think, I did that, right? I don't have that. Like when I get done with it, I look at it and I think, I wish I could afford to pay somebody to do that next time. Like I don't want to be a part of it. In fact, I took a spiritual gifts assessment this past week in our Christian Chapel 101 group, and just kind of seeing where is that at. And so one of the things that had there was craftsmanship. And I think the scale was like from 3 to maybe, 24. And so craftsmanship, I was a 3. I would have been a 0, but it made you pick at least a 1 on some of those things. So all that to say, when I come to a passage like Matthew 7, and you want to preach it, you want to be faithful to it, and you want to fully give the weight of what Jesus is saying, I just know if I go down the road of using building analogies, I'm going to mess it up. Because I can fake it for a little while, but eventually I'm going to be like, when you're building, you just got to make sure you really hammer in the screws really good. And then you're all going to be done and checked out. Like forget it. So I got something a little more my speed to help us understand this morning. So Legos, right? Everybody can build with Legos. How many of you were Legos people as a kid? Okay, how many of you, maybe, I don't know when Legos came out. Maybe those were before your time, so you were more of like a Lincoln Logs person. Anybody? Lincoln Logs? Yep, okay. All right. Maybe you were beyond that, and you're like, we didn't even have Lincoln Logs. We had sticks and mud, but you built stuff, right? Some of us, yes, that was me. If so, can you talk to all of our children afterwards? Tell them how good they have it, about how you had to eat mud pies and all those other things. Like, just kind of reframe it. But Legos, there's that moment when you're building the Legos where you open it up and you dump it out, and here comes all the good stuff. And in that moment, you kind of look at it and you see the pieces and you see the parts and you know what you need to build. Now, what Jesus is telling us is that every single person has pieces in their hands at every point in life, and you're always building something. All right, so we look at our lives and we start to understand in every single place where I have any responsibility, any talent, any ability, anything at all, with every breath, God has put pieces in my hands, and I'm going to build. Now, in the story Jesus tells, there is a wise builder and there is a foolish builder, but the thing we need to understand is both people are builders. We are all always building something with our lives. And so at the beginning of the year, it's a natural time for us to look ahead and say, what do I want to build with my life this year? How am I going to use the pieces God has put in my hand to build them in a way that matters? But what I really want to encourage you to do sometime this week is look back at the last year and see what you built with your life. Right, with the time, the energy, the talents, the opportunities, the jobs, the educational, the volunteer spaces, the physical abilities, the mental abilities, with everything you had in every relationship, what did you build last year? And there's a couple things that help us in that evaluation process. First of all, I would encourage you, look back. If you have a daily planner, look back at that. If you have a calendar, if you need to look back at your phone, maybe it's just you sit down and have a conversation, and you start to think, where did I spend most of my time? Where were we going over and over and over again? And then start to evaluate, what was I building in those spaces? Right? So for a lot of us, we're going to quickly discover we spent a lot of time at work. Or if you're a student, you spend a lot of time at school. If you're a parent, you spend a lot of time with your kids. We spend a lot of time in a few areas. And the question we want to ask is, what did we build in those areas in 2019? Did we build anything that matters? What Jesus is telling us in Matthew 7 is not only are we all building, but he has a plan for what we're supposed to be building. Right? We'll get to it in a little bit, but he basically says, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, this is the plan. This is the way his people are going to build their lives. It's a foundation we're going to build on. Now, when you dump out that box of Legos, there are really two approaches that a kid would take. The first is that the child who sets up the box on the table, and they pull out all the pieces, and they start to go to work trying to build that. Right? They want to build the car, the plane, the whatever it is. The other approach is the kid who takes it and decides, I'm going to build something else. And if you've had that child, so my kids, we had one kid out of 3 that loved Legos, but he was a by-the-book Lego builder. Like, if he grows up to be a builder, there will never be any issues with him following building codes or not. He will always do it, because if it's written, that's how it's going to happen. He's not going to move on to step 2 until step 1 has been accomplished. So when he's done, almost every time he ever built something, when he was done, he would say, Dad, come look at this. And I would come look, and it looked exactly like the thing on the box. Now, others of us, we have kids that they saw that and thought, that seems boring, I'll make something better. And then they're in there working, they're quiet for a while, and then they holler at you, Mom, Dad, come in, and they hold up their creation for you, and they say, look! And because you're a good parent, you know not to say, what in the world? But you know to say, oh, that is interesting. What did you build? And you're praying that they don't say, what do you think it is? So you're like, I don't know. The spirit of Van Gogh in Legos? Like, I don't really understand, but I don't think it's anything good or normal. We might take you to a psychiatrist later. Like, you just kind of have that moment. But what Jesus is telling us is, look, you're going to build something, and what you build ultimately is going to be evaluated. Right? So he says that the wise man builds his house on the rock. The foolish man builds his house on the sand. And then the storm comes, and the rain begins to come down, the waves begin to crash, the wind begins to blow, and what has been built is tested. And so what you and I are thinking about at the start of the year is, not only do we all have stuff in our hands that we're building, but we also understand everything we build is going to be tested. This year, there are going to be things that come and test our marriages. There are going to be things that come and test us at work. There are going to be situations that test the way we've been caring for our finances, for our bodies, for our friendships. And as followers of Jesus, we don't have to fear the testing. Because he says, if you have built on the foundation, what you have built will last. The other side of that, though, is if you're not building on a foundation of Christ, then no matter how big, no matter how beautiful, no matter how grand your life might be, when the waves come, it's going to come crashing down. Because Christ is the only thing that endures. He's the only thing that lasts. And so looking into a new year, our prayer is, God, don't just give me an awareness of what I'm building, but help me to build in a way that matters long after I'm gone. I don't know about you, but I don't necessarily want to spend all the years of my life building things that don't matter 60 days after I've died. All right, I mean, just think of the way it's worked in your own life. I mean, most of the time, like we went through this with my grandpa. He was a wonderful, God-fearing man, like built significant things with his life for the kingdom of God. Used the resources to help build orphanages around the world, all of these wonderful things. He was also a farmer in western Oklahoma. And he passed away in January, and just this past September, that farm that he spent 70 years developing was sold to someone else. And it was that moment of sadness of, man, it's just a piece of our family is gone. And I know, looking at my own life, like, man, I'm not even going to have 400 acres for my kids to sell when I die. It's going to be like, here's my little third of an acre in Broken Arrow. Don't fight over it, right? Keep the oil rights. We don't have them anyways. So all of these things, but I don't really want, but so much of what we spend our time doing does not survive testing. It's revealed as being less than stable, not strong enough to withstand it. But this is what we naturally devolve to. We naturally build things that are easy and require very little effort. And so it's why for me, at the beginning of a new year, I'm evaluating, what am I building with my free time? What am I building? Am I building things in me? Am I building things in my family? Am I building things in friendships that are going to last? Or am I just building a longer list of suggested titles to watch on Netflix? Am I just building a deeper knowledge of why the Kansas City Chiefs have a real chance to win the Super Bowl this year? Right? Am I building these things? Now, those things they're fun, they're okay, but they are not going to last the testing that comes in my life. And so Jesus tells us, a wise builder builds on the stone, the foolish builder builds on the sand, but both are going to be tested. And so then it brings us in this evaluation to the thought of, okay, if that's true, then what do I do? How do I make sure I'm building my life in a way that matters? And this is, again, if this is Jesus' altar call to the Sermon on the Mount, he gives us the answer. He says, anyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is the wise builder. So he's basically telling us, both here in Matthew 5, 6, and 7, what you've just heard me say in the Sermon on the Mount. If you hear those and do those, you are the wise builder, and what you are building will last. But if you either don't hear those or you don't do those, you are the foolish builder, and it will be washed away. And so my hope for us today as we kind of start this kingdom builders emphasis is to help us understand that the way we work every single day, the way we interact in our relationships, the way we invest in our marriage, in our children, in our school, in our job, in all of these spaces, everything God has put in our hands, he has a plan for. And his plan is that we will always be involved in building his kingdom. Now, what happens to a lot of us is we understand that, we agree with it, we embrace it, and then we go back Monday morning to work, to school, to our homes, to all the things that we do, and we get our heads so buried down in the details that we lose the big picture view of what we're doing. Right? It's like if you get stuck in that Lego building process and you come to a part where you maybe can't find a particular piece or it doesn't go together quite like it says that it should. And in that space, you can get really, really frustrated and you can quit and you can walk away from it, losing the big picture of, hey, here's where we're going and here's what we're doing. And so, yes, Jesus has a plan and he's with you in the details and he's going to lead you and he's going to guide you and he's going to speak to you. But my hope for you in 2020 is that it's a year where you understand all the things you do down here are part of building his kingdom out here. All right, so when you have a big picture view of your life and what God has called you to do and the things that you're building, it changes the way you approach work. Because now you understand, when I go to work every day, it's not just about completing the project, managing the people, or getting the paycheck. But when I work, God is rewarding me with resources, with income that he is going to use to further and to expand his kingdom in the community and around the world. You understand when you go to work, it's not as a teacher just about trying to get through the day, but in that moment, every interaction with a student, you are being given the privilege of building the kingdom of God in front of people who need to know him. In every difficult situation, in all the normal and the mundane, we are building the kingdom, and yet we get so focused on the details that they begin to lose their significance, and we begin to think, does any of this even matter? I mean, just honestly, has anybody ever had that thought about their work? Does this matter? Does it matter? If I quit tomorrow, like I know it would be a headache, but would anyone actually care? I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one. Like, talk to me pretty much every Monday morning. That's how I'm. Does it matter? Would anyone notice they would notice I didn't preach, but somebody else would come? Would anyone care? And we have these thoughts. Why? Because we are getting lost in the details. We've lost this big picture view, right? What I do doesn't matter because of who I am. It matters because it's what God has called me to do. So that's where I'm going to find my significance. That's where I'm going to find my commitment to doing it well, because God has created me for this purpose, for this reason, put me in this place at this time. And until he tells me to stop or go somewhere else, he is trusting me to be part of building his kingdom here. And he's doing the same thing for you. So we've got to get that big picture. One of the ways that we do that at Christian Chapel in January is we kind of try to back out and say, hey, here's some opportunities for us to partner with what God is doing to build his kingdom around the world. In a moment, you're going to hear how you can help build his kingdom in Southern Asia. Some of you who sign up for Royal Family Kids Camp this morning, you have an opportunity to be part of building God's kingdom in the lives of children who've been abused, abandoned, and neglected. And it's a chance for us to kind of get out of the normal, to stop, to lift our eyes up and to think, oh yeah, I'm doing something bigger than spreadsheets and grade cards and medical charts. I am building the kingdom of God with my life, with my energy, with my resources, with my prayers, and with my finances. And when we begin to get a big picture view of what God is doing, it adds dignity, it adds worth, it adds significance to every moment of every day, and it also gives us the ability to embrace the privilege and responsibility of building God's kingdom where we are and partnering with others to build it in places we will never go. In the 1600s, there was a big fire in London. If you read about it now, it's known as the Great London Fire. And it swept through the city. It burned down homes, it burned down businesses, it burned down churches. And if you've ever been to London, you have seen St. Paul's Cathedral. It's built up on a hill in London. It's a beautiful place. And it was threatened by the fire. In fact, it was damaged to the point where they initially thought they were going to be able to restore it, but they wound up having to demolish it entirely and start over. So after the Great London Fire became the Great London Rebuild. And one function of that was they wanted to rebuild all of the smaller neighborhood churches, but they also wanted to rebuild St. Paul's Cathedral. And so they hired an architect named Christopher Wren. And this project would wind up taking Wren 30 to 40 years. Basically, from the time he was hired, it took him until the day he died. And he lived to see the completion of St. Paul's. Now, one of the unique things Wren did was that as he worked around town on these smaller churches, they were easier to build, they were faster to build, but he always built them with an understanding of trying to use those buildings to frame a view of St. Paul's when it was finally completed. And if you go there today, you can see there are times where like the steeple of a local church will point you to the spires of St. Paul's Cathedral. It's an amazing amount of foresight that went into this. So I think we have a picture of St. Paul's Cathedral today. So this is what Wren was working on, late 1600s, early 1700s. So this is a local church, right? A little more impressive than Christian Chapel. Not much, but a touch, which it should be. It took them 40 years to build it, and they had government funding. So I feel like we could build a pretty impressive one too if we had all of that. But So Wren, he's working hard. He's working all over town. He's working all over this job site, just day after day after day. And one of his primary jobs as the architect is to constantly check in with his contractors to make sure they are doing their job well. Because it doesn't take but one or two of them to mess something up, and it throws the whole thing off schedule. And so he would regularly make rounds among the workers and talk to them and observe them and check on them and sometimes correct them. There's a story that one day he was working his way through the spot where some men were working on some stones that were going to go in the cathedral. And he stopped to the first one and he asked him, he said, "Sir, what are you working on?" And the man just kind of looked up real quick from his work and said, I'm cutting this stone, and kind of went back to it. Second man he said, sir, what are you doing today? And the guy looked at him and said, I'm earning 3 shillings. Right? We all know that worker. We hope we're not that worker, but you know them. Like, what are you doing at work? I'm earning a check and I'm going home. And that was the second guy. The third guy he talks to is bent over, and he's dressing the stone. He's got the hammer, the chisel out. He's really doing some detail work. And he stops him. He says, sir, what are you working on today? And that man stands up, and he's got his hammer and his chisel in his hand, and he stands up. He doesn't know who Christopher Wren is, right? This is before LinkedIn, so he doesn't know what his face looks like, but stands up in front of him, kind of throws his shoulders back, looks him straight in the eye, and says, I am working with Sir Christopher Wren to build a grand cathedral. And it's just this wonderful example to us of how even when you're down in the details, if you will stop, take a breath, throw your shoulders back, lift your eyes up, you can begin to say with the same amount of significance and meaning, what are you doing today? I am building the kingdom of God. Well, it looks like you're changing diapers. I am, but I'm building the kingdom of God. That looks like a spreadsheet. It is. But I'm building the kingdom of God. It looks like a chaotic classroom of second graders. It is. And I am building the kingdom of God. It looks like a difficult conversation with your spouse. It is. But she's got her hammer and chisel, and she is building the kingdom of God in me. Right? In every space we enter into, when we believe, we have heard the words of Jesus, and we are putting them into practice, we can live with confidence. And we might not always see how our little piece fits into the bigger picture, but you can trust that Christ, as the master architect, has an understanding of exactly who you are, exactly what you're skilled to do, and exactly how that fits the larger picture of his kingdom that's being built. And so this morning, I want us to finish by just getting a chance to hear from one of our friends who works to take the gospel to people who've never heard it before. So if you're watching online, unfortunately, we're going to cut off now due to the sensitive nature of where he works and the things he's engaged in. My name is Chris Dow. I'm the lead pastor at Christian Chapel. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like it, share it, leave us a comment. Definitely hit that subscribe button so you can enjoy more content like this in the future. If you'd like to learn more about who we are as a church, you can visit us online at christianchapel.com. I hope you have an awesome week.